Vespera, a vampire story. Part 1. Visit from a vampire. It was a quiet, cold winter's night. Ethan had just moved to the city a few weeks ago, starting fresh for a new job. The streets below his third-floor apartment were empty, blanketed in thick, untouched snow. The streetlights flickered softly, casting a warm glow that reflected off the white ground, while inside, the dim lighting of his small apartment offered him comfort. The radiator hummed faintly, and the thick blankets wrapped around him held in the day's warmth. Everything felt peaceful, the kind of silence you get when the world is covered in snow and all sounds seem muffled, distant. Ethan was just beginning to drift off, his body relaxing into the quiet, when a noise cut through the stillness. Tap, tap, tap. It wasn't the radiator. His tired mind tried to brush it off, but there it was again. Tap, tap. Louder this time, like a finger gently rapping on glass. He sat up in bed, blinking sleep from his eyes, his heart starting to beat just a little faster. The sound wasn't coming from the door. No, it was coming from the window. Ethan's apartment was on the third floor. He lived alone. There shouldn't have been anyone outside his window. His breath caught in his throat, dread crawling up his spine as he carefully slid out of bed, the wooden floor cold beneath his feet. Slowly he walked toward the window, every step making the sound clearer. His mind raced with all the logical explanations he could come up with. It had to be something like a tree branch or maybe a bird. There was no way. He reached the window, hesitating before wiping away the fog on the glass with the sleeve of his shirt. For a moment, his mind refused to comprehend what he saw. There, standing on the ledge outside his window, was a girl. Her dark hair was tangled with snowflakes, her skin pale and cold-looking against the night. She wasn't dressed for the weather, just a light coat draped over her small frame. Despite the cold, she didn't look distressed. No, she was smiling. Ethan stared at her, completely frozen, his mind battling between disbelief and the reality of what he was seeing. His breath fogged the glass as he looked closer, expecting the vision to disappear or make sense somehow, but no. She was really there. The girl raised her hand and waved, almost playfully, as if it was a casual meeting between friends and not a bizarre encounter 3 stories above the ground. Her lips curled into a soft, knowing smile. Ethan's mouth went dry. He felt his heart beating in his ears. His instinct screamed at him to turn away, to pretend this wasn't happening. But something about her pulled at his curiosity. With shaking hands, he fumbled with the window latch. This is insane, he thought, yet he couldn't stop himself. Slowly, he pushed the window open, the icy wind cutting into his face as it rushed inside. Snowflakes swirled around her, dusting the floor beneath the window. She stood there, the cold not seeming to affect her at all, her eyes locked on his. For a long moment, neither of them said anything. Ethan wanted to ask who she was, how she got there, but his voice stuck in his throat. "Can I come in?" she asked, her voice light, with a strange warmth that didn't match the freezing air. Ethan stared at her, his mouth slightly open. Can she come in? His heart raced even faster. It was the strangest question, yet somehow it felt important, like his answer would mean more than just letting her inside. He hesitated, every instinct telling him to close the window and back away. But she just stood there, smiling softly, with no urgency in her voice. Curiosity overtook his fear, and against all his better judgment, he nodded. Yeah, sure, he said, his voice barely a whisper. The girl's smile widened, and with that, she stepped lightly inside. The cold seemed to follow her, but she moved with such grace that Ethan felt almost as if he were watching something otherworldly. She brushed snow from her coat and stood there for a moment, taking in the room. Ethan backed up toward his bed, his mind still whirling. Who is she? Why is she here? The questions tumbled over themselves, but before he could ask, she spoke. "I'm Lily," she said casually, as if this was just a normal introduction. "And I'm a vampire." Ethan blinked. The word hung in the air, strange and heavy. He stared at her, waiting for some kind of joke, a laugh, anything to explain this away. But Lily just watched him, smiling with a glint of amusement in her eyes, waiting for him to react. He felt the blood drain from his face, his heart pounded painfully in his chest. He wanted to move, to say something, but all he could do was stand there in disbelief. "Don't look so scared," Lily said with a playful tone, stepping closer. "I can't come in unless someone lets me in. And, well, you did." Her voice was soft, almost teasing, but there was something in her smile that made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. Before Ethan could respond, she tilted her head slightly and parted her lips, revealing 2 long, sharp fangs. His breath caught in his throat. His legs felt weak beneath him as the room began to spin. Everything faded. The last thing he saw was her sharp smile. And then, darkness. Ethan slowly stirred awake, his head feeling heavy as though he had been deep in a dream. His body felt strange, stiff from how he had fallen asleep. But hadn't he fainted? The memory of the night rushed back to him, the knock at the window, the girl standing there covered in snow, and then her fangs. He shot up in bed, his heart racing. Was that real? Did I imagine it? His eyes darted around the room. The room was dark save for the faint blue light of dawn creeping in from the edges of the curtains. Everything seemed normal, until his gaze landed on the figure sitting casually at the foot of his bed. There, cross-legged and fully engrossed in his Nintendo Switch, was the girl from last night. Lily. "Oh, finally, you're awake," she said without even looking up, her fingers deftly pressing the buttons as a game's music played softly in the background. "You know, you really shouldn't leave your character standing still like this. You'll get wrecked." She grinned, the playful tone of her voice a stark contrast to the image that had haunted Ethan's dreams. Ethan blinked, his brain struggling to catch up with what he was seeing. The terrifying vampire from last night, the one who had knocked on his third-floor window and showed him her fangs, was now sitting on his bed, casually playing his Nintendo Switch as if she had been there forever. What? He stammered, pushing himself further up the bed, trying to make sense of what was happening. His mind was racing. Is this some kind of trick? Am I dreaming? Lily paused the game and looked up at him, a mischievous glint in her eyes. "You fainted," she said with a little smirk. "I was just introducing myself and bam, you hit the floor. Not very flattering, you know." Ethan's cheeks flushed in embarrassment, but the confusion outweighed everything else. "I fainted because you said you were a vampire. And your fangs—" Lily waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, that. Yeah, I figured it might freak you out a little, but I didn't think you'd actually pass out. Honestly, it's kinda cute." She tilted her head, studying his expression with amusement, clearly enjoying his confusion. "Don't worry, I didn't bite you or anything. You're alive and well." Ethan's eyes widened, and he instinctively checked his neck for any marks. Nothing, just his usual skin, unmarred and very much human. His breath started to even out, but the disbelief still lingered. You didn't bite me?" he asked, his voice still shaky. "Then why are you here?" Lily leaned back, crossing her arms behind her head, as if this was the most normal conversation in the world. "Oh, I just wanted to introduce myself. I'm new in town, you see. It's not every day I meet someone who looks as fun to mess with as you." She grinned again, showing just the faintest glimpse of her fangs, but this time it felt more playful than threatening. Ethan couldn't help but stare at her. His heart was still pounding, but not from fear anymore. More from confusion. "You're new in town?" he repeated, still trying to wrap his head around the idea of a vampire casually moving into the neighborhood. "Yup, just moved in," Lily said cheerfully, as if they were chatting over coffee. "This city's got some charm, and I thought I'd make some friends." She glanced at him, her eyes twinkling. "You being one of them, of course." "Friends?" Ethan echoed, incredulous. "But last night you—" I know, the whole vampire at the window thing was a bit dramatic." Lily admitted with a laugh, tossing his switch onto the bed beside him. But come on, how else was I supposed to introduce myself? Knocking on doors is so boring. And besides, she added, leaning forward slightly, her voice dropping to a mock-serious tone, we can't come in unless you invite us, remember? Ethan swallowed, suddenly very aware of the decision he had made last night. So that part is true, he asked carefully, about needing an invitation. Of course, Lily said with a shrug. Old rules are still in play. Once you said come in, I was golden. He stared at her for a moment, trying to process everything. The fear that had gripped him the night before had started to fade, replaced by something he couldn't quite place. Curiosity, maybe, or the surreal feeling of chatting with someone who had just casually confirmed that vampires were real, and apparently friendly. Lily stood up and stretched, her small frame surprisingly graceful. Anyway, I've overstayed my welcome, she said, glancing at the window where the first rays of sunlight were creeping through. The sun's coming up soon. I should probably head out. Ethan's heart raced again, though this time not from fear. Wait, so you're just leaving? That's it? Lily turned to him with a teasing smile. What, did you think I'd stick around for breakfast? She asked, raising an eyebrow. Sorry, I don't do bacon and eggs. She winked. Despite himself, Ethan let out a short, nervous laugh. The whole situation was so bizarre, he didn't know how else to react. Lily moved toward the window, pausing just as she reached the sill. She glanced back at him, her expression softening just a little. Look, I didn't mean to scare you last night. It was, well, let's call it an icebreaker. She flashed him a grin. I'll stop by again sometime, okay? It's been a while since I've had a human friend. Before Ethan could respond, Lily opened the window and, with a light leap, disappeared into the early morning fog. The room was instantly colder, the warmth of her presence gone in an instant. Ethan sat there for a moment, staring at the open window. His mind was racing again, but this time, the fear was gone. Instead, he found himself oddly looking forward to her next visit, to be continued. That's all for tonight. If you enjoy my bedtime stories, please like and subscribe to my channel. Thank you for joining me tonight.